The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, March 5th, and a little unusual hour, but Wednesdays are going to be like this. They're going to be a little later than everything else. I'm teaching a class for the Ayn Rand University that overlaps with our usual time for the show, so Wednesdays will be either this late or maybe like a few hours earlier, but they will be later than usual. All right. We should get rolling. Today we're going to talk about the swamp of tariffs, Supreme Court decisions, or decision with regard to Trump's, attempts to USAID, close USAID, Ukraine, European response, particularly Germany and France, China, deportation, and we'll see where else we go. And of course, you guys get to control much of the dialogue by asking questions. That is what the Super Chat is here for. We have a goal for the Super Chat, so please take that into account. And you can support the show like Eric just did with a sticker. And you can also ask questions, which helps determine what I will actually talk about. All right, let's jump in. So yesterday, after the tariffs went in effect and everything, and the stock market went down, and the Commerce Secretary went on TV and basically said, Trump is maybe, we're negotiating, maybe Trump tomorrow will rescind the tariffs, or maybe they'll, draw them back a little bit, or maybe they'll change them. And the market was like, yeah, that's just great. And the market went up a little bit. There was a lot of expectation that he would get on the phone with Justin Trudeau, which I think he actually did, and he'll get on the phone with Sheinbaum in Mexico. And from what I understand, there are negotiations going on in the background constantly, and negotiate some deal where tariffs are rescinded, and where the negotiating tactic. That's what we're told. Everybody said though. Doc Fox says, I was wrong, you were right. Yeah. Thank you, Doc Fox. Not everybody admits that. But that was at least some of the expectation going into today. Well, there was some news on the tariff front today. There was some tariff mitigation done today, but a lot less than what the Commerce Secretary was anticipating, or what Bessent, I think, at Treasury was anticipating. And that is the swamp kicked in. Trump had a conference call with the CEOs of the three largest automobile companies. Jennifer's boss was one of the people on the phone call. And they cajoled him into doing away with these tariffs, and explained the cost of the auto industry, and explained everything about, parts going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they'd be tariffed to oblivion. And Trump said, okay, I get it. All right. And he gave an exemption for the automakers for 1 month. Not a very big exemption. 1 month. They get an exemption. And the consequence of, and hopefully during this month, they will figure out how to deal with the tariffs, how to minimize the back and forth, how to structure this so the tariffs don't hurt them as much. Now, who knows who else is going to be asking and getting exemptions? I'm sure that a lot of people who paid $1 million, $5 million to have lunch with Trump or towards the inauguration or whatever are lining up to make various requests for exemptions from tariffs. This is a field day for the swamp, almost as good as cryptocurrency reserve fund. You expect much more of this, except a lot more exemptions and exclusions and whatever goodies to provide to people. In the meantime, Ford stock, if you're a Ford shareholder, this was a good day. It climbed 5.8%. General Motors added 7.2%. Having good relations with Trump pays off. Being able to go over there and get exemptions pays off. I don't know that Apple has an exemption on the China tariffs, but I think it's highly likely that they'll get something. Generally, the stock market liked that a lot. The indexes were basically, a lot of them were up, right? And still down for the month, but the indexes were up off of yesterday's lows. And I think what the stock market is saying is, Trump's making exemptions. They'll make exemptions for all the important industries. Yeah, it's only for a month, but after a month, he might cut a deal with Trudeau, and he might. Everybody is expecting Trump. He can't be as bad as he says he is. He can't be as bad as he's acting out as if he is. There has to be some give. Something will give. Now, the reality is that these tariffs are really destructive to the United States, but much more destructive than to the United States. They're destructive to Mexico and Canada. Mexico and Canada basically built their economies over the last 20 years around a free trade agreement between the three countries. They have a significant portion of their economy is geared towards export to the United States and export between Mexico and Canada, but primarily the U.S. The U.S. is the largest economy in the world. The 1994 NAFTA agreement eliminated most barriers to trade between the countries. And more than 80% of both countries, Mexico and Canada's exports, go to the U.S. Indeed, the deal turned Mexico into an export powerhouse, becoming one of the world's top exporters of vehicles, beer, and flat-screen TVs. Canada used the free trade deal with the United States, which they've had in one way or another since the 1960s, to really grow its economy. It stagnated over the last few years, but to the extent that it has grown to a large extent because of the incredible benefits of trade with the United States. Trade is win-win. And this has been going on for decades. And then Trump, in his first term, said, NAFTA was bad, so let's renegotiate. And he renegotiated a deal, a good deal for everybody. It wasn't as dramatic a change from NAFTA as he pretended it would be. It was tinkering, but still. Now, these tariffs are huge for both Mexico and Canada, who both expect to see GDP decline. And from the perspective of Trump, I think a lot of people still think, hope, believe this is a negotiating tactic. But I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I've never thought it is. This is a deeply held belief that Trump has. There are consequences of his complete misunderstanding of trade, his complete misunderstanding of the win-win nature of trade, and the complete misunderstanding of the balance of trade deficits, and all that. The guy's ignorant of economics. It's not pretend. He'll use it to negotiate. He's a bully. He'll use every leverage he can to humiliate the other side, to put the other side down. Remember, Canada's the 51st state. What's the purpose of that rhetoric, if not just to bully and just to put the other side down? There's no value added from talking like that. But that's Trump. Trump is a bully. So yes, he will use tariffs to pressure, to negotiate, to get something out of the other side if he can. But deep down, ultimately, Trump believes in tariffs as some kind of retribution against the evil of free trade. Now, Newt Gingrich believes, and I read this today, that Newt Gingrich believes that Trump is really, quote, from Gingrich, increasingly convinced of the McKinley model. This is President McKinley, 19th century. High tariffs lead to massive capital investments in the United States, leading to high-paying jobs. I assume this will be a 2 to 3 year transition where we'll all have to adjust. So, as Trump said yesterday in his longest State of the Union speech ever, long and, just absurd, ridiculous speech, as he said, there will be some cost, some pain to be suffered from the tariffs. But all of this is really an effort in his mind, to restructure the U.S. economy. And, around an explicit mercantilist program where all production needs to come back to the United States and where trade is viewed, particularly importing, is viewed as a negative. And that this is somehow good. Now, again, if you understand economics, if you studied any kind of economics, certainly if you are an advocate for or believe in or have studied and view free market economics as the truth, this is one of the dumbest ideas possible. And whenever it's been implemented, has resulted in bad outcomes. Now, McKinley could get away with it because in McKinley's time, the U.S. actually had, with very few exceptions, a free market. And the United States market could adjust pretty, flexibly to the tariffs and still grow. And even though tariffs were a net drag, a net loss on the U.S. economy, the economy still did well because the economy was free. This doesn't increase tax revenue. It decreases tax revenue. And there are no more jobs, right? We have, for all intents and purposes, full employment in the United States. You want more jobs and let in more immigrants. But you don't want to let in more immigrants. So there are no more jobs. This is all fantasy. All fantasy. But today we don't have a free market. So we're much more likely today with these tariffs and then if he has tariffs in the EU and reciprocal tariffs for other countries, then the most likely outcome is, a dramatic or significant decrease in economic growth and the potential, a real potential for catastrophic contraction. Maybe not leading to a Great Depression, but leading to a significant recession in the United States and potentially globally. That's what happened. Smoot-Hawley, the last time tariffs of this level were applied on a global scale. And of course, we also know, Ayn Rand talks about this in The Roots of War, that free trade is one of the, not guarantors, but one of the predictors of peace. Not guarantees of peace, because you can have free trade and war, but it's much rarer to have war in a time of free trade. And that when you destroy free trade, when you undermine free trade, you dramatically increase the probability of a war. And by the way, I was going to mention this later, but now this seems like a good entree. China, the Chinese had this amazing statement. China released this statement today. Quote, if war is what the United States wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. I wonder who's driving us more towards World War III, Zelensky or Trump? I mean, the answer's obvious. But that is an ominous statement by the Chinese. That is not good. But this, this is the consequence. Remember, the Great Depression led up to what? It led up to World War II. So, and the Great Depression was the thing that tilted it in. Not the only thing. There were lots of things. One of the things that tilted us into Great Depression was Smoot-Hawley. I'm not predicting a Great Depression. I'm predicting us getting closer to war than we've probably been, certainly since the Berlin Wall came down, maybe since the Cuban crisis, and not because of Ukraine, but because of Trump's being a bully. Bullies entice a response, a physical response. I'd finally, this was great. I did find this economist, this Canadian, works at George Mason University, not surprisingly. And he was basically saying, look, there's only one thing Canada should do about the U.S. tariffs. He said, he was almost like he'd listened to Yaron Brook Show, but of course, what I'm saying about tariffs, and I know this is hard to believe, what I'm saying about tariffs is not radical. It's not Yaron Brook radical for capitalism, free market, laissez-faire free market. This is kind of standard stuff. Anyway, this economist says, Canada is making a mistake retaliating with tariffs. In other words, just because the United States chooses to shoot itself in the knee, and yes, it hurts Canada, we shouldn't make that hurt even worse by retaliating. Retaliation only makes the Canadian situation worse, not better. He said the solution is unilateral trade liberalization. His name is Vincent. No, I think this is. Is it Vincent or is it Alexander Lavoie? Anyway, I'm not sure who the economist is. Oh, Vincent Geloso. Vincent Geloso. He says, the solution is we should trade with the rest of the world. Let's have free trade with the rest of the world. In other words, let's lower trade barriers. Let's lower tariffs to zero unilaterally. Let's do the exact opposite. Since what Trump is doing is hurtful of America, let's learn from that. Let's learn from that and do exactly the opposite. That is, lower tariffs to zero. Now, it would be great if Poilievre actually believed in that and did that. I doubt it, because the two things about tariffs you have to understand. One is the economics of it. We all know the economics of it. They make no sense. And a response to somebody raising tariffs on you is to lower tariffs on them, not to raise them. It's to lower tariffs on everybody and encourage your producers to export elsewhere. Try to get other countries to import, to buy your stuff. And generally, the response should be reduce regulations, reduce controls, liberalize your economy, make yourself freer. That's always the solution, right? But there's a second dimension to tariffs, and that is the political. That is the political. And what I'm suggesting has nothing to do with whether you live in a free market or not. This is the solution. The solution to any problem is always to move towards more freedom, even if you're not in a free market. So the solution for Canada today, given the mixed economy it has and America has, is to lower tariffs. That's the economic solution. That's the only economic solution. That's the best economic advice they can get. But then there's politics. And politics has to take into account the anger people feel towards the United States, the patriotism, as fake as it might be, the Canadians have for Canada, the wanting revenge, even if it costs you. And I think Paul Livar, even if he understands the economics, is not going to go out there on the campaign trail saying, oh no, what our response to Trump should be to lower tariffs. Our response to Trump should be greater free markets, greater free trade. No. Because politically, that's not tenable. It's just like a lot of what Trump is doing today has nothing to do with economics. His tariffs, he's ignorant of tariffs, so he probably believes in them to some extent. But it's also about appeasing his base. It's also about politically convincing his base that he's working to benefit them, to make their lives better, to take credit for whatever improvements they have in the future, to be seen as acting and strong and America first, whatever the hell that means. And that's the political aspect of tariffs. And that's populism. That's what you have to deal with when you have elections and you have to appease the electorate. So it would be great if Vincent Geloso had a major impact on Canadian response to Trump tariffs. I suspect he won't. As he says, I will tell everyone that no Trump, the only way forward, in this case for Canada, is unilateral liberalization. Of course, that's true in the United States as well. The best trade policy the United States should have is zero tariffs unilaterally. Unilaterally. All right. Let's see. I think that covers what I want to say about tariffs. We talked so much about tariffs. And by the way, those of you who are new to me, to the Yaron Brook Show, and by the way, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I do have shows where I break down how trade works, the win-win nature of it, how tariffs interrupt that process, how tariffs are lose-lose. Both parties lose. They might not lose equally. In this case, Canada loses more than the United States. Canada depends more on imports, on exporting to the U.S. than the U.S. benefits from the imports. It's not equal, but it's a lose-lose. I explain all that in great detail. So all you have to do is in YouTube, search Yaron Brook Trade, and you can find the shows that I've dedicated just to this. I think I have a few Capitalism 101 shows dedicated to trade, so and dedicated to the evil of tariffs. So if you want a deeper understanding and a deeper explanation for the problems with tariffs, it's there. It's on my channel. It's available. Of course, you can find lots of other places where this exists. Trade is, again, something that most economists, almost all economists, get. Even Paul Krugman got his Nobel Prize for a paper that basically advocated for free trade and the benefits of free trade. All right. Yep. Let me just do this once again. Okay, let's talk about the Supreme Court. So, USAD, as you know, Musk went into USAD, Dodge went into USAD, and basically stopped all payments. And it's about $40 billion or something like that are halted payments. Most of those payments to entities outside the United States. And about $2 billion of those payments are for what the recipients claim are for services already rendered. So this is stuff where they did what the government asked them to do, and the government promised to pay them, and now USAID is not paying them. And a court, a U.S. district judge, basically ordered the administration to promptly release funding to contractors and recipients of grants from the U.S. Agency of International Development and the State Department for their past work, about $2 billion supposedly. The Trump administration appealed this, and this was before the Supreme Court today. So it wasn't a full case. This is just that Trump is asking for the Supreme Court to rule against this judge while the judge reviews the entire USAID program and whether what Dodge is doing there is legit. So all the justices are ruling here is the judge right in demanding the release of this $2 billion to contractors who've already done the work? And the Supreme Court ruled by a 5-4 decision to overrule the judge, not to overrule the judge, to agree with the judge and demand that the payments be released. Now, it's interesting because there was no opinion, at least no opinion of the majority. This was done, it was just ruled with no opinion. Alito did write in opposition to this. But I really don't understand the opposition. I mean, there's a contract here. It seems like there's a contract, right? You ask people to do work for you, and you have to pay them. And you can't just say, no, we're not, we're shutting down USD, so we're never going to pay you, or we're not going to pay you for a few months while we figure out what we want to do with USAID. And these organizations are saying, but wait a minute, we did the work. We have, in a sense, a contract. And the Supreme Court ruled by 5-4, yes, you need to pay them. This was a setback for Trump, but there are going to be a lot of these cases. There are going to be a lot of these cases. By the way, Mark asks, should America have zero tariffs while other nations apply them to us? Yes. What other nations do to their own citizens, how other nations harm their own citizens, if other nations choose to tax their own citizens and abuse their own citizens and destroy their own economies, doesn't mean we should copy them. Tariffs are not a war against us that we have to defend ourselves. Tariffs are harmful to the people who put the tariffs in place. They're a little harmful to us as well, but the answer to them is not to harm ourselves more. The answer to that is, okay, harm yourself, we'll adjust. We have a great economy that can adjust easily to tariffs placed on us by other countries. We should stop being worried about that. Focus on freedom. Generally, general principle, unless we're talking about physical war, the only movement of the government, the only legitimate movement of government, the only legitimate steps that government can take, only legitimate steps government can take are towards more freedom. It's not legitimate for the government to raise taxes. Not legitimate. Tariffs are taxes. It's not legitimate for the government to increase spending. It's not legitimate for government to expand its role in the economy. The CHIP Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, none of those things are legitimate. The only steps that are legitimate are steps that are towards more freedom. To the extent that DOGE is there to literally, actually cut taxes, cut spending, then it's legitimate. It might not be doing it in a good way, and at the end of the day, they have to follow the law, but that's the right direction. To the extent that Trump's tariff raise taxes, impede free trade between Americans and people outside, they're wrong. The national security, I've dealt with this a million times. There is no national security argument for tariffs. None, nada, zero. You want to have more steel production in the United States? then the government can tell the steel companies, we'll buy from you X capacity. We'll pay you to keep factories available, to have people trained, so that if ever we need extra steel, you'll have the capacity to do it. By the way, Mexico and Canada are not our enemies. So having tariffs on them serves negative. It's harmful to national security because we want to be able to import cheap steel from them. We want to be able to import stuff from them cheaply. By the way, that leaves more money for us to be able to invest in defense. There is zero benefit for national security ever for tariffs. You want to stop the importation because the country you're importing from is an evil country and you might go to war with them, then you boycott them. Boycott them. Free trade is not about both sides. Free trade does not require both sides. I trade with you guys. I go into the, I go and buy, you guys go buy a Tesla. You know, the fact that Tesla's being subsidized by the government, should that impede your willingness to buy the car? I mean, all our auto companies are regulated and subsidized at the same time. No. If a foreign country wants to do damage to their own country, why should that stop you from buying? And remember this. Here's the most important thing about trade. Most important thing about trade is trade is not done between countries. The United States does not import anything from Mexico. Trade is done between individuals. You buy something the Mexicans make. Your dollars flow to some company, some employee in Mexico. The government, and this is the important thing, I'm not for free trade. I'm for individual rights. I'm for the ability of you to trade with whomever you want, unless you trading with them is a national security threat. The government has no business telling me who I can buy stuff from and who I can't. Again, unless there's a national security threat. There is none with Mexico and Canada. If I want to buy stuff from Mexico, why is it Trump's business or Biden's business or any politician's business? Why is it the government's business? And I'm buying legal products. I'm buying stuff I'm allowed to own. I mean, either we are free in this country or we are not free in this country. That's the question. Free trade has nothing to do with this. I believe in free trade because I believe that individuals should be able to buy whatever they want to buy from whoever wants to sell it to them at whatever price the two can negotiate. And the fact that there happens to be a border between them should make absolutely zero difference. It's not the job of the government to secure industry. It's not the job of the government to be fair. It's not the job of the government to protect jobs. It's not the job of the government to manage the economy. It's not the job of the government to tell you, me, and everybody else what we can and cannot buy and from whom we can buy it. Government is there to protect me. I don't need their protection when I'm buying stuff from Mexico or Canada. I really don't. That's it. It's not that to protect my job. It's not there to protect my income. It's not there to protect even my standard of living. It's there to protect me physically from violence. That's it. And me buying something from a Canadian does not involve violence. So the government has no business in the transaction. It just has no role to play one way or the other. And it doesn't matter what Canada does to its citizens. Canada might beat up its citizens on a regular basis. It's no excuse for the American government to beat up on its citizens. I got distracted from the Supreme Court because I, don't have that much to say about Supreme Court, and these points about tariffs need to be nailed down. even if I have been saying them for two decades now. They need to be nailed down. The BS around tariffs is so extensive. Anyway, Supreme Court ruled, as I said, 5-4. Barrett and what's his name, Chief Justice Roberts, with the 3 liberal judges, ruled against the Trump administration. The other 4 conservative judges ruled for the Trump administration. And, yeah. I have to comment on this again. Mark says, TSMC just invested in Arizona. TSMC is already in Arizona. It's in Arizona because it wants to be in the United States, not because of Trump and not because of tariffs. And by the way, if anybody should get credit for TSMC being in Arizona, it's Biden. I mean, this is the Trump zombie syndrome. The Trump zombie syndrome. Give credit to Biden. If you're going to give credit to anybody for TSMC being in Arizona, give it to Biden. Don't give it to Trump. Trump will take it, of course. So stop it. Stop this nonsense. It isn't true and it doesn't work. And they're not going to make the most advanced chips in Arizona. TSMC is already investing in the United States because of the CHIP Act, because Biden is subsidizing it. And you hated that, but now because Trump is doing it, God, it's infuriating. And some of these people think they're for freedom. And, this idea that tariffs hurt consumers, no. They hurt consumers, they hurt producers, they hurt manufacturers. Who do you think steel tariffs hurt? Manufacturers of automobiles, washing machines, anybody uses steel. Construction. Who do you think lumber tariffs hurt? Construction. Tariffs hurt the entire economy. Consumers, producers, everybody. And they are anti-freedom. They limit freedom. How can you be for limiting freedom? I can't be. Not unless there's a hot war going on. Hot war going on. Did I say ASML? Who said ASML? All right. Let's talk about Ukraine. We haven't done that in a while. It turned out that Trump was yesterday and is even worse than we thought. I warned you about this yesterday or the day before. I said it's one thing to stop military aid, military equipment to Ukraine. That is a disaster. It's really bad. And to do it all at once is just nasty and evil. But Trump has taken the step that I warned you of yesterday. Much more significant. And that is to stop providing Ukrainians with intelligence. Now, this doesn't cost the U.S. anything. It doesn't come out of your pocket. It's intelligence the U.S. is gathering anyway. The question is, does it share it with Ukraine or doesn't it share it with Ukraine? And as of this morning, the United States has stopped sharing intelligence with the Ukrainians about Russian troop movements, about locations of Russians, and about Russian launches of missiles and drones against the Ukrainians. Ukraine does not have satellites, does not have sophisticated intelligence gathering abilities. And as a consequence, it is basically flying blind right now, fighting blind right now. Putin can launch missiles, drones, into population centers. Before, the United States would give the Ukrainians a head up that the planes were in the air, missiles boarded, and the missiles were on the way to Ukraine. Ukraine could get its defense systems up and running and ready to defend its cities, defend its infrastructure. No more. The United States is now consciously helping the Russians by withdrawing intelligence support from the Ukrainians. It's not just targeting information, but all intelligence about advanced warning of drone and missile strikes that Russia's carrying out. I mean, it basically is leaving Ukraine naked. I mean, this is about as nasty and evil. This is how you treat a foe, an enemy. Not only that, but because the United States shares intelligence gathering facilities with the British, it has barred the British from providing intelligence to the Ukrainians. Right? In other words, right now, everything that came from the Department of Defense is stopped. Images, signal intelligence, satellite intelligence, all of that is gone. Even if you don't think the United States should be providing money to Ukraine because, we don't have money and budget deficits, all of that stuff, all the excuses people have because they really support Russia and they really want Russia to win. This is completely uncalled for. Has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with wanting Russia to win. The Trump administration has basically sided with Russia completely, thoroughly. Supposedly, according to some media, the U.S. is now saying they will suspend all the weapons supplies and intelligence until a date is set for peace talks with the Russians. So Putin gets to decide, right? Because as long as Putin can delay, in the meantime, cause massive damage to Ukraine without an ability for the Ukrainians to defend themselves. God. The HIMARS, you remember the HIMARS? The long-range missiles that the United States sold to the Ukrainians? Well, without the intelligence information, the HIMARS are useless. They need American intelligence data and American GPS satellites in order to strike their targets. So when Trump talks about peace, it's now unequivocally clear what he means. What he means by peace is the defeat of Ukraine. What he means by peace is Russian victory. What he means by peace is the peace of the grave, the peace of death for Ukraine. And all the people out there advocating for this, all the people out there advocating for, putting pressure on Ukraine, it's all Ukraine's fault. And this is really evil stuff. Particularly when you consider just really how evil and nasty and horrible Vladimir Putin really is. The kind of regime he runs, the kind of country he runs, and the kind of subhuman being he is. Now, we've talked about this. The Europeans are trying to step up. And one of the challenges that Germany is facing in order to kind of gear up its defense spending and its support for Ukraine is that it is It does not have budgetary capacity to spend more money. And it cannot borrow money because it has something called a debt brake. A debt brake is something that was instituted in Germany in 2009 by the two largest political parties. And it basically says you cannot exceed a certain percentage of GDP in debt. So you can't, in an emergency or whenever, you can't borrow huge amounts of money. Well, the two largest political, well, not the two largest, the largest and the third largest political party, the two traditionally largest political parties in Germany, before even reaching a coalition agreement to form a government, have now met and agreed to basically put the debt brake aside. Many say this is the biggest U-turn in Germany in decades. As a consequence of putting the debt brake aside, they will start issuing debt in order to finance their defense spending. So this is the new deal. All defense spending above 1% of GDP will be exempt from the debt brake without a cap. Defense spending target right now is 2.5%, means that 1.5% of GDP, they can take out additional debt in order to fund. Also, they've agreed on a $50 billion a year infrastructure fund for 10 years, 1.25% of GDP. Now, this is Keynesian thinking. Germany's in a recession. The idea is let's go out and build infrastructure to get us out of a recession. Sad Keynesian. They've also reformed the debt brake for the provinces, for the states, I guess, federal states. Used to be zero, couldn't take on debt. Now it's raised to 0.35. And they've agreed that in the future, there will be more reforms to the debt brake, more substantial reforms, more permanent reforms to it. Together, this means that they're going to spend an additional 3.3% of GDP on military and infrastructure. This is huge. Germany's never done anything like this. It took Trump to get them to do this. This means the defense budget is going to grow dramatically. The parties are hoping that Germany's next government can create a $500 billion euro, more than dollars, infrastructure fund that will allow them infrastructure, meaning military, as well as kind of regular infrastructure. This will allow Germany not only to increase its support for Ukraine. It right now has no excess weapons to send Ukraine. But what's happening right now is a lot of the failed auto companies, auto parts companies at least, are shifting from manufacturing auto parts to manufacturing of weapon systems. Now, this still has to pass Parliament, and it's going to be interesting to see if this will pass. The AfD, of course, is against it, not because they're against government spending, but they're against it because they're against supporting Ukraine. AfD is explicitly pro-Russian, just like the Republican Party. No, wait a minute. The Republican Party is not explicitly pro-Russian. The Republican Party is implicitly pro-Russian. But at least the AfD is honest enough to be explicitly pro-Russian. And Germany is ramping up to supposedly meet the challenges that the United States backing off of Europe pose. And I think this is the one good thing that could happen out of all of this. You will get a more robust, more confident Europe with more military resources that can stand up to Russia by itself. That will be a good thing. It will allow the United States to leave NATO with very little consequences to European security. I think this is a real wake-up call. So while I think what Trump is doing is horrific for Ukraine, and it could have been done, if the goal was to wake up the Europeans, it could have been done differently, could have been phased in, it could have been done smartly. This is waking up the Europeans, there's no question. And you can see that really with the French. Macron has delivered, I think, he's delivered a speech to the nation today, but really it was for all of Europe. He basically said that Europe needs to prepare for war with Russia. The speech was broadcast all across Europe. And in the speech, he basically said that, he believes, the Europeans believe that Ukraine is just a beginning for Russia. That Russia has its sights on the rest of Europe. That Europe is not going to accept capitulation of Ukraine to Russia under the guise of a peace negotiation. And he actually challenged the Americans to choose which side they're on the side of Europe, on the side of Russia. In addition, importantly, Macron said that he has decided, and I'm quoting, I've decided to begin strategic discussions on protecting our allies on the European continent with our French nuclear weapons. France is only one of 2 European countries that has nukes. The other is the UK. France's nukes are different than the UK's, so they complement each other. But France, because of Charles de Gaulle, who left NATO in the 1960s and developed his own nuclear strategic assets, is basically saying we will provide a nuclear umbrella to Europe. We will prepare Europe for the day the U.S. leaves, the U.S. withdraws. So, this is huge. France, I think, by the way, this is all saving Macron's political career. He seems to be thriving right now. He was on the ropes before. But he has positioned himself as kind of a leader within Europe, positioned France as a leading country within Europe, and positioned France as the protector of Europe. Now, the Brits have also committed to talking about providing such a nuclear umbrella. The British nuclear program is much more integrated into the American, and it'll be interesting to see if those can be separated out and what Trump is going to do if the Brits start talking about providing a nuclear umbrella to Europe. While the U.S. has, and now remember, the U.S. has nuclear weapons in Europe to protect Europe. So this is above and beyond, and this is all in anticipation of the U.S. ultimately leaving Europe. That is what Europe is preparing for. I think it's good they're preparing. One other thing that's happening in Europe is Trump is losing some pretty long-term allies. I mean, many people on the right in Europe are denouncing what Trump is doing. Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen, of all people. The leader of the France's far-right National Rally political party called the United States' decision to halt the transfer of military aid to Ukraine, quote, brutal, cruel, and reprehensible. In an interview with Le Figaro, the leading French newspaper, yesterday. Nigel Farage, like Trump's best friend. Nigel Farage, in a recent statement, condemned J.D. Vance. An interview J.D. Vance, or statement J.D. Vance made, in which he appeared to insult UK and France, calling them, quote, random countries that haven't fought a war in 30, 40 years. We talked about this yesterday. Because they said they would deploy troops, the peacekeeping force in Ukraine. Fawaz stated, quote, J.D. Vance is wrong, wrong, wrong. For 20 years in Afghanistan, pro rata, our size against America's, we spent the same amount of money, we put the same number of men and women in, and we suffered the same losses. And Nigel Farage was seen in British Parliament agreeing with the condemnation of Trump's actions towards Ukraine. So even some, not everybody on the right in Europe, recognizes just how insane, how immoral, how irrational, immoral, irrational, same thing, Trump's actions are, and they're waking up. Dave, thank you, Dave Dean, for the $100 sticker. That is great. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's see. So there was one other thing in Europe I wanted to say. One other development today in Europe, but yeah, I didn't write it down, so it slipped my mind. All right, maybe it'll come to me later. Let's see. Oh, yes, I know what it is. Yeah. One way in which the EU is getting ready to address the Ukrainian issue and to address its defense against Russia is that it has announced that it is basically withdrawing Hungary's right to vote on key issues related to Ukraine and Russia. So if you remember, in the EU, some things have to be unanimous, some things have to be by, I think, a 2/3 majority, or 60, I think it's 2/3. Hungary is expected to vote always on the side of Russia, and now on the side of the United States, it turns out. It turns out the United States is on the side of Russia. Who knew that my prediction that Trump was a fan of Putin and was an accolade of Putin and would do what Putin told him to do would come true? But it has, completely. Anyway, they're going to marginalize Hungary. I think they should kick Hungary out of the EU completely. Hungary is a leech on the EU. It basically, its economy survives only because of its subsidies from the EU. There's absolutely no reason to include Hungary in the EU. It is an anti-European, anti-freedom country. It's a little, authoritarian state. I say little because it has bigger ambitions than it really is. Orban is a little dictator. They should kick him out. But reducing his influence is okay for now. Okay for now. All right, a couple of quick items. China. Yeah, I did mention the statement that China made about war. I think that is, I'd much rather have Ukraine in the EU. Much rather have Ukraine in the EU and NATO than Hungary. I would kick Hungary out and bring Ukraine in. Absolutely. Ukraine is heading in the right direction. Hungary is heading in the wrong direction. Hungary, again, as somebody who's been there, talked to Hungarians, visited, as somebody who's been to Ukraine, talked to parliamentarians, talked to students, talked to people. I can tell you, Hungary is anti-Western values. Ukraine is pro-Western values. In a sense of freedom, free speech, in a sense of individualism. Hungary is a reactionary state. It's a state hearkening for 1220. It's a state hearkening for the past. It's religious. It doesn't have free speech. It doesn't believe in independent media. All of those things. It is a bastion of Russia within the heart of Europe. And Europe should just expunge it. Expunge it. Yeah, I've got the book. Where is my book? Wait, here it is. No, I don't know. It's somewhere here in my bookcase. I've got the Hungarian Black Book. It's a book that was given to me last time I was in Budapest by one of the free market guys, the real freedom fighters in Hungary, freedom advocates in Hungary. And he gave me this book. It's a book that lays out all of the authoritarian crimes, if you will, of Orban and his regime. It's a little black book of not communism, but Hungarian statism, called it. I mean, you guys, so many of you are just, what you get is news from Fox. What you get is Tucker. What you get is Trump and the people on the right, in the American right, who adore Hungary. That's because, and this is why I so fear the American right. It's because, yes, they do adore Hungary, and that model is an anti-liberty, anti-freedom, anti-American model. It's what we should be rejecting, and that's why we should have rejected Trump, rejected Vance, rejected that whole, and certainly rejected Tucker, that whole, new right that has come to dominate so much of American politics. And if Elon Musk adores Orban and Tucker, then we should reject Elon Musk as well. All right, so one more story about China, and that is that Elbridge Colby is being nominated for the number 3 job in the Defense Department. He's going through hearings in the Senate right now. This is a position that does need Senate approval. And so I actually bought his book. He's got a book about China. He's got a book about his strategic vision of China. He's considered the intellect, the strategist in terms of U.S.-China relations under Trump. That is, he is the guy. I mean, Hegseth is not a particularly smart person, certainly not strategic person. He's like the face of the Defense Department. He's the, we're going to crush DEI. He's the thuggish guy. This guy's the intellect. So I figured I'd buy his book, find out what he believes. And I got through the first chapter. He's terrible. He believes that China is a threat to the United States, even if it was a free country. He believes that freedom has nothing to do with whether China is a threat to the U.S. or not. China's a hegemon. It wants to be a hegemon. It wants to be influential in Asia. We want influence in Asia, and that puts us on a conflicting paths. But ultimately, he believes that we need to come to some agreement with China in a sense. And that agreement basically is that, yes, as long as certain U.S. interests are protected, mainly shipping lanes and things like that, yes, Asia is China's, in a sense that China should be the dominant player in Asia. And that China needs to let off on its influence in America, because in South and North America, because that's America's domain. And again, this goes back to what I told you a few days ago about how Trump, I think, sees the world and how his foreign policy team sees the world. It basically sees the world as there are a number of big players, Russia, China, the United States, and they need to carve up the world between them. And, China gets Asia, basically, as long as that doesn't harm U.S. interests too much. U.S. gets America, and Russia gets whatever it wants, I guess. Certainly Eastern Europe, it gets. So when Aldrich Colby asks, when he was asked about Taiwan, I mean, look, he basically said, Taiwan is very important to the United States, but as you said, it's not an existential interest. The core American interest in denying China is denying China regional hegemony, right? A regional hegemony that would disrupt U.S. interests. So we want good relations with Vietnam, and we want good relations with Malaysia and Indonesia and whoever will, we can, so that China just doesn't dominate those interests. Because, look, we need that part of the world because we need the trade from them. And he said, losing Taiwan, if Taiwan falls, would not be good, would be a disaster for American interests. But, you know, the U.S. military balance with China in the region is such that, you know, we're not going to intervene. Because he's already decided that we probably won't win. He also said that Taiwan needs to spend 10% of its GDP on defense, that Japan needs to spend 3%. And he also believes that conflict with China is not necessary, that it can be avoided. And I think, yeah, it can be by carving up the world in this way and not interfering with China too much in terms of its influence. It's completely defeatist. But this is the attitude, I think, of the Trump administration vis-a-vis China. We'll negotiate. And one of the things on the negotiating table will be Taiwan. I think that is the attitude, ultimately. The main thing is no war with China, no World War III. The main thing is that we preserve certain of our interests in Asia. But other than that, we're not going to intervene. China is also presented as a much bigger monster than it really is, because they don't recognize that authoritarianism is a problem for innovation, for economic growth, for economic success. So they think China is going to flourish in spite of being authoritarian. And Kobe says, look, China's big and it would have a huge economy, even if it was free, and we would have to contain it. We would have to deal with it, even if it was a free country. Of course, it was a free country. Why do we care if it got big and if it had lots of influence and if it had a bigger economy than the United States? That would be a good thing, not a bad thing. Trade is win-win. Just like you don't care that somebody's richer than you, shouldn't care that somebody's richer than you. Why do you care if China's richer than you if they're free? All right, finally, this is just a funny story. You remember the deportations that the deportations that Republicans were doing, and the Trump administration was using military airplanes, C-17s and C-130s, to fly illegal immigrants back to their countries. They flew to Guatemala, Ecuador, Peru, Honduras, Panama, Guantanamo Bay, and ultimately to India. They would load the prisoners into these planes and fly them to these places. Well, it turns out that it's too expensive. It costs a fortune to fly a military plane with deportees to these various countries. One of the places they flew deportees was India, illegal immigrants from India. And each one of those plane trips cost $3 million. Maybe 100 migrants in each plane. $300,000 per migrant to get them to India. Could have bought them a first-class ticket on an airline for a lot less than $300,000. When looking at flights to South America, the costs were about $20,000 per migrant. Per migrant. So they've decided to stop using military planes to fly them to other countries or to Guantanamo, and they will find other ways in which to deport people moving forward. Just thought, 30,000. 3 million divided by 100, you're right. 30,000. Still could have bought first-class tickets for everybody on a commercial flight and saved a lot of money. A lot of money. Probably 90% of that could have been saved. And that's first-class ticket. All right, everybody. That is the news on this Wednesday, March 5th. We've got somebody from Lithuania saying, Trump lost a bit of respect I had for him. I'm from Lithuania. Yeah, I mean, I have no respect for Trump to lose. So I've never respected Trump. I've never had any respect for Trump, not an ounce of it. And all he is doing is living down to my expectations. I sometimes think, okay, Yaron, maybe you're exaggerating. He won't be as bad as you think. He won't be as bad as you think. And then he is as bad as I think. So even I'm surprised that I'm right as often as I am. By the way, there's stories that the U.S. Is engaged in. I mean, Trump is very, very tough on Hamas, and he's got these statements where really, really tough. He came out with another one today. And yet, stories are that in the background, there are negotiations between the Trump administration and Hamas, independent of Israel. I'm sure the Israelis are quite nervous about this, given what's happened to Ukraine. U.S. negotiating directly with Hamas, who knows? Who knows? All right. We have some super chat questions. Let's do those, and we'll go from there. Remind you. Let's do our reminders and our sponsors. We have two sponsors. Alex Epstein. Alex Epstein is the world expert on fossil fuels, on climate change, environmentalism, energy, everything energy, electricity, electric grid, everything energy. And Alex has a Substack, alexepstein.substack.com, where he provides the knowledge and provides talking points that are unbelievably educational. I mean, I learn so much when I read one of Alex's Substacks, his essays, the talking points he provides. I know so much more about energy policy, the grid, the oil and gas because of Alex than I did before. And I encourage you to one of the most important issues, and one issue where Trump looks like he's going to be good on, one of the few, is energy. And if you want to know how and you want to know in what way Trump will be good at it, reading Alex's Substack is, I think, essential readings. alexepstein.substack.com. And then the Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor of the show, and they are now looking for people, students or people who just can't afford to come to OCON, but who are serious students of Objectivism, would like to attend OCON and don't have the funds. You can fill out an application. Of course, OCON is the premier Objectivist conference in the world. There'll be 500 people there. There'll be great lectures. There'll be great, the leading intellectuals will be there. And of course, there'll be hundreds of other people, like-minded people, which are really fantastic. So you too can apply for a scholarship to OCON, no matter where you are in the world, by the way. You can come from overseas. So you should apply. Can't guarantee you'll get it, but doesn't cost you much to apply. You can do that at aynrand.org, AYNRAND.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. You can get information there. All right, reminder, be great if you guys became Patreon supporters of the Yaron Brook Show at whatever level you can afford or whatever level you see this as a trade, as a win-win relationship. So please consider becoming a supporter on patreon.com or on PayPal, whatever is easiest for you, whatever is more convenient for you. PayPal, Patreon. But that is the bulk of the support that this show gets is from those platforms. And remember, this is 100% listener-supported show. Couldn't do this without support from you. So thank you. Thank you to everybody who supports the show, whether it's through Super Chat, stickers, or Patreon and PayPal. All right. I thanked Dave. I also need to thank Alex, who became a member. You can also get memberships. Thank you, Mary Eileen, for the sticker. And let's see. Thank you, Stephen, for the sticker. So thanks, guys. Really, really appreciate it. And let's answer some of your questions. We've got a few. More. You can ask more if you want. We've got plenty of time. But we'll start with Clark. Clark says, without objectivism, it's hard to imagine people not defaulting to negative emotions. If you don't know the right answers about the world, you're stuck in conceptual chaos and fear. Fear always leads to envy and hatred. I think that's right, but let's not assume that without objectivism, the world ends, because the reality is that the world existed for a long time. There were happy people in the world. There were successful people. There were incredibly innovative and productive people even before objectivism. People can be reality-oriented. They can be rational, even without objectivism. Fewer people, because they will have to, in some sense, discover these principles for themselves. But it does happen, and it is out there. People are rational, at least in certain areas of their life, but in many cases, in vast areas of their life. There are people out there who have basically good ideas. They don't have completely right ideas, and they're confused, and they're wrong about certain things, but I think they have enough so that they don't have to descend into envy and hatred. And I think most people, most Americans, I used to think this, maybe I have to revisit this, but most Americans are not resentful and hatred and hateful constantly, because they have values, they are rational, they take their careers seriously, they take their work seriously, they work hard, they're productive, they have people they love, they work rationally to pursue certain of their values. They're just not consistent. And they certainly don't have knowledge when it comes to politics. And of course, the more the government grows, the more it intervenes in our lives, the more important politics becomes, and the more important it is to have clarity around politics. And yes, people are it should be very scary these days, given what's happening in Washington, if you don't understand the dynamics. Even if you do understand dynamics, it's scary, but at least you understand the dynamics, and you understand what needs to be done to stop them, and you understand what the alternatives are. OC Sure says, apply your zero tariffs between individuals across borders to zero implements between individuals within our borders. Yeah, you should have zero barriers to trade, both within the borders and without the borders. You should be consistent. Liam, do brilliant people have a greater ability to compartmentalize than the rest of us? Take Henry Ford and Elon Musk, ingenious producers that moved humanity forward while simultaneously holding on to bigoted, childish beliefs. Yes. Yes. I think that people who are particularly smart have the capacity to rationalize their irrational behavior in ways that I don't think other people can. Yes, I do think that Musk and Henry Ford and people like that have this unique capacity to be able to hold really, really bad ideas while at the same time being brilliant producers in ways that most of us can't. John, I dislike hecklers, but felt some satisfaction when Representative Green rained on X's parade, X equal Trump. Yeah, I mean, I thought that Democrats did themselves no favors yesterday. Their behavior was childish. Now, they were confronting a child, granted, but it's just not effective. Nobody was convinced by it. Nobody changed their mind about it. I think the leadership of the Democratic Party told them not to do it because they understood that it was only damaging, no good could come of it. And it's sad to see that when one political party, the Republicans, devolve into childish, tribal, moronic behavior, the best we can expect from the other party is to do exactly the same. So, yeah, I think it was awful. I did not get any satisfaction from it. And of course, the people who most complained were the most leftist, who have the baddest ideas and pose no alternative to what Trump is suggesting. I mean, that's the quandary we live in, is that we don't have even a semblance, even a inkling, even a slight movement towards a political party that is better. They both suck so badly. Silvanos, thank you. $50. Really, really appreciate that. Thanks, Yaron. A Trumpist relative said your show was full of shit. If you're wrong, I don't want to be right. LOL. If you're wrong, I don't want to be right. LOL. How can we praise Trump on energy when his foreign policy is so horrific? Well, I mean, you have to call it the way it is. I'm not praising Trump. I'm just saying the one thing Trump will be good on is energy, and he will be. That's reality. So it's just a matter of identifying reality and recognizing it. And good here means move towards freedom. So there'll be small movements towards freedom, or maybe even large movements towards freedom in energy, but in nothing else. In nothing else. Okay, I'm going to comment on this. If selfishness is a virtue, you have to address the freedom of individuals within our borders first. Foreign affairs are foreign to the virtue of selfishness. No, they're not. That's absurd. Foreign affairs are directly related to your freedoms at home. If somebody drops a bomb on you, then your freedoms at home, you're dead. If Russia poses a real threat to the United States, then Russia needs to be dealt with. And in terms of trade, it's irrelevant. I want to buy stuff. My freedom at home demands that I be allowed to trade with anybody I want, including people not at home, not in my country. So it's not that I'm concerned with the freedom of Canadians or the freedom of the Mexicans. Indeed, tariffs are not issues of foreign policy. Tariffs are 100% issues of freedom at home. Freedom within your borders. I want the freedom within my borders to be able to buy from whomever I want. My freedom does not end with the border. I should be able to travel where I want. I should be able to buy anything I want. So and by the way, some of you might have noticed there's a real implication to this. I should be able to hire anybody I want. I should be able to invite anybody I want into my home, no matter where they were born, no matter what their citizenship happens to be. So this has direct implications to immigration as well. But that's, of course, even more controversial than trade. But it's all about freedom at home. It has nothing to do with freedom overseas. And it's not foreign policy. Immigration is not a foreign policy issue, and trade is not a foreign policy issue. It is 100% a domestic policy issue relating to our freedoms at home. If national security is threatened, fine. If I'm importing, I don't know, what could I be buying something that would be a national security threat? If I'm buying chemical weapons to kill Americans, sure, stop me. If I'm hiring terrorists, sure, stop me. If I'm hiring people that are gonna, that are Russian spies, please help, stop me. Oh, wait a minute. We'd have to stop some nominations of the Trump administration. But if I'm just buying, oil from Russia, or if I'm hiring Mexicans to come and build my house, none of your business. None of your business. Not your average algorithm. Rumors of Trump may pardon Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd. I'm starting to think he may want to provoke mass protests so he can invoke martial law and speed up the fascist takeover. I don't know. Would I be shocked? No. I think he regrets not sending the military into the streets last time. I don't know if the military would have gone. They might have disobeyed his orders. I'm not sure. But I think now he has people at the top of the military who will do exactly what he says. So I think he doesn't mind if there were protests. He would like to bring in the military into the streets. And I think I think he would do it. So is he going to try to provoke something? Could be. Could very well be. Andrew. Elon says about Trump that he loves the man. I think there's a severe defect in Elon's self-esteem to make Trump into a savior father figure. Is that psychologizing? What do you think is the cause of this intense reverence? Well, I mean, we have to be careful on a number of different levels. One, do we know that Elon is telling the truth? Does he truly love the man? Or is he sucking up because it gives him power? So I think it is psychologizing to the extent that we don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know the dynamic. We don't know what Elon's getting out of it. Something unhealthy is going on there. And it's feeding Elon's, and I do think Elon has a self-esteem issue, but that I get from the cheating scandal with the video games much more than from this. I don't know what exactly is going on there, but it could be that Elon always wanted to be president. He can't be president, but this is as close as he's going to get, and Trump is giving him the possibility to go in there and break stuff and do stuff and be at all the big meetings and meet all the important people. Remember, altruism at the end of the day makes people real second-handers, and there's an element in which Elon is a real second-hander. I don't think this has anything to do with Mars. This is all about being at the center of attention. This is all about being at the center of action. This is all about having amazing power. Nothing to do with Mars. So I don't know. You would have to have a lot more information about Elon and his motivations. And the relationship. Robert, speech was brain killing. Yes, it was. Spirit destroying. Yes, that's why I didn't listen to it. Can't. Optimism wasting. Save us, Yaron. Kidding, as if Yaron Brook Show and ARU and Peterson Academy and giving talks around the world isn't enough. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was the longest, most boring, most bombastic, most self-congratulatory, most, what do you call it, partisan speech ever in that form. And Trump being Trump on steroids. On steroids. Notice that authoritarians give long speeches. Long speech. You know how long the Gettysburg Address is? You know, Gettysburg Address, 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes. Churchill's speeches were not that long, but Putin's well over an hour. When Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, used to speak, 3-hour speeches. So authoritarians give long speeches. Hitler, long speeches. Doc Fox, should we buy the dip? I don't believe in buying dips. What if the dip is just the beginning of a bear market? What if the dip is just the beginning of a much bigger dip? Buying the dip depends. What's your assessment of the U.S. economy? What's your assessment of the stock market? Is it expensive? Is it cheap? What stock should you buy in the dip? I don't buy in dips. And you should, but generally you shouldn't take investment advice from me. Richard, starting a fund for you to avoid references to multidimensional chess in the same sentence as Trump, including quotes by Trump zombies. Anyone with me? Well, I mean, I think it's, you got to acknowledge the 8th dimensional, that's going on here. All right, I'll try to avoid chess references when talking about Trump. But I do it in a flippant, cynical way. So I think it's clear that I think it's the exact opposite. Micah says, I think you're right that even under the most draconian of laws, if they are objective and predictable, well, they wouldn't be objective, but they would be predictable. People can cope. Once oppressive behavior becomes random and unpredictable, it breaks men. Yes, and most authoritarian governments do that. And there's a scene in Atlas Shrugged which reflects that. The scene where, oh God, names escape me, but the guy from the Science Institute meets Reardon, and read and says, your laws are contradictory. I either break this one or that one. There's no way for me to abide by the laws. And the guy says, yeah, of course, that's how we like it. That gives us power over you, right? The unpredictability, the vagueness, the ability to interpret the laws differently in different times is what gives the bureaucrat his power. If the laws were clear-cut, I knew exactly what they meant, then the bureaucrat would have very little power over me. Why is the tax code so damn complicated? Because it's up for interpretation, which gives them the ability to interpret it against me and come after me. Dr. Ferris, thank you. So absolutely, Michael. Midas says the aristocracy of pull is out in full force, no question, and tariffs are just a way to bring them out even more. So tariffs create swamp animals. Hopper Campbell, detractors claim Ayn Rand was a psychopath, sociopath, for advocating selfishness. Could you make the case altruism is the actual pathology that leads to antisocial behavior? Yes, I mean, I do. I've done this so many times, right? Altruism causes you to resent other people because your life is meaningless. You're supposed to sacrifice to them. But you kind of know that your life is not meaningless. It's not meaningless to you. It's the only thing you have. It's the beginning of everything, and in a sense, the end of everything. There is no world for you without your life, and there was no before you came into being. So life is everything for you, and you know there's a contradiction here. I have to sacrifice for you guys? Ugh, I hate you. You're the reason my life is not as good as it could have been. And it's that causes hatred, resentment, envy, disengagement, isolation. If I hang out with other people, I'm supposed to sacrifice to them, and if I don't, I feel guilty that I haven't. Easier just to be by myself. Easier for me just not to deal with other people. Or, I don't want to sacrifice to them, so I'll abandon morality and demand that they sacrifice to me. But in any case, nothing healthy comes out of altruism. It leads to disintegration. It leads to man against man. It leads to war. War of man against man. Liam, sad fact, most of the enemies you have are people you once helped in life. I don't know if most of the enemies I have are people once I held in life. I mean, I'm not sure that's completely true, but certainly some of them are. Certainly some of them are. James, you think you'll be sprightly and upbeat in your 80s and 90s, or more of a grumpy old man type? I think I'll be upbeat, but yeah, there's definitely a side of me that's a little grumpy. But mostly it's an act. Mostly I'm not I don't think I'm mostly grumpy. But yeah, I can complain and I can be grumpy and so on. But I think deep down I'll always be the upbeat, sprightly. Of course, it also depends on what kind of 80s and 90s I have, right? I watch so many people now in the 80s and 90s, including my parents, and my father, and people I know in those age groups. And life has become so harsh physically for them that it's not surprising that it takes a toll on their attitude towards life. It takes a toll on their thinking. I mean, your cognition is declining, and you know your cognition is declining. And the knowledge that your cognition, and that's the thing you've lived off of your whole life, is declining. I mean, it's just a really, really, really horrible, feeling, horrible thought. So it's very difficult to be, I think, upbeat and if your cognition is declining. So I have to hope and work hard at not allowing myself to deteriorate physically, to stay fit, to stay engaged, to have a engaged mind, and prevent myself from being overly negative and grumpy. Liam, if tariffs cause an economic downturn quickly, do you see a point where Trump advisors focus their efforts more on deregulation and tribalism? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think, I don't think all of his advisors are equally bad. So I do think the Treasury Secretary is a free market guy generally and is anti-tariffs. He's just going along for the ride. I think there are probably other people in the administration who are more oriented towards free markets than they are towards tariffs. I think there's a lot of opposition within the Trump administration to tariffs. And I think that if tariffs fail quickly, those voices will be louder and there'll be more efforts around other things. And there might also be efforts to get rid of the deregulation, the tariffs, and pretend that they were only there temporarily, pretend that it was just a bargaining, strategy. We will see. Michael, how much dollars does it cost to watch your lectures on Peterson Academy? Can you post a direct link? PetersonAcademy.com, right? Peterson Academy, one word.com. And you register. I think it's $40 a month. I don't know if you have to commit to a whole year. I think a year is like $500, something like that. But I'm not sure. So I don't know if you have to commit. You might be able to just sign up for a month, watch what you can. Now, my finance lectures will be coming out soon, so maybe a couple of months, but it is, I believe it's $40 a month. Maybe somebody's registered here and knows what it costs, and you can share that with Michael. But just do PetersonAcademy.com and check out the registration. Nevfeld, if Trump appeared in Atlas Shrugged instead of Thompson as someone who bankrupted more than 25 businesses, including casino, people would say such things don't happen. The House always wins. Yeah, I mean, the villains of Atlas Shrugged are pretty moderate as compared to the villains of the real world. So I agree. Hopper Campbell, was Trump calling Juan Pocahontas during the speech racist or a well-deserved zinger to a pompous status? No, I don't think it's a well-deserved zinger. It's beneath the president of the United States to use such language. It's making fun of her claiming to have some Indian blood. I get it, but it's a State of the Union address. And yeah, I mean, the Democrats were behaving like little children. Doesn't mean you descend to their level. So I just think it's stupid. She deserves whatever. Any zingers you can get, but not from that position, not in a State of the Union address, not like that. I mean, but Trump does this to everybody, right? He loves to put people down. It's part of his shtick. Esoteric dichotomy. Have you visited many museums? If yes, favorite. Many museums all over the world. Art museums primarily. Favorites, I don't know, the Louvre, the d'Orsay in Paris, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and the Accademia in Florence, the Borghese Gallery and the Vatican Museum in Rome, the Tate Britain and the National Gallery in London. The British Museum is also worth visiting, definitely in London. The Glyptothek in Copenhagen, the Prado in Madrid. I mean, all the great museums. I mean, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Cincinnati Art Museum, the L.A. County Museum has some really good pieces. So any city I can, and I have the time, I go to the museum, the art museum. Every city, any city in the Western world. Lyron, do Trump's action threaten the dollar reserve currency status? I mean, not yet, but ultimately, if trade starts falling apart across the world, people will need less dollars. If people are antagonized towards the United States, they'll lose their interest in investing in the United States, so they'll need less dollars. If trade is falling apart, as a sophisticated, globalized transaction, it will revert to being more local than global. The dollar loses then. So ultimately, yes, to the extent that the world order, the globalized world order, the amazing, magnificent globalization that has happened since World War II and certainly since the Berlin Wall fell, if that starts really breaking down, and it hasn't yet, there's still a huge amount of global trade, but if it does, we're just at the beginning of this trade war, then yes, then why would people use dollars? It will become much more regional, and therefore regional currencies could happen. Again, there are multiple effects on the dollar price. On one hand, people still want to invest in the U.S. Tariffs create more demand for dollars, and the dollar goes up. But if people decide they don't want to invest in the United States, indeed they don't want to have anything to do with the United States, they don't like the United States anymore, then that puts pressure on the dollar downwards. And you're seeing both of those effects right now in the really high volatility, not like Bitcoin, but high volatility of the dollar right now in the world. Can't read the name. It's in Japanese. Hi, Yaron. What do you think about America going back to its isolationist stance as we've seen recently? I think isolationist attitude shown by the recent Ukraine talk is exactly what could spark World War III. I mean, I agree. I think isolationism in this form is a recipe for World War III. I think Trump is not moving us away from World War III, as he claims to be doing, but moving us towards World War III. I also think that isolationism is a tricky project. Trump doesn't seem to be isolationist when it comes to Gaza. He wants to annex it. He doesn't seem isolationist when it comes to Greenland. He doesn't seem isolationist when it comes to Panama. So I think isolationism is a bad word because it doesn't reflect what's actually going on. I don't know how you would define what's going on right now, but it's Trumpism and carving out the world into domains of influence. And I think this way of viewing geopolitics is very, very dangerous. And I think that whatever he's trying to do, Trump is bringing us dramatically, not a little bit, dramatically closer to World War III. He might think in his mind that he's moving us away from it. I don't think he thinks. But he's moving us towards World War III. Appeasing Russia will only make Russia more aggressive. Appeasing Russia will only make China more aggressive. Talking down the importance of Taiwan only makes China more aggressive. Giving the impression to the world, which I think he does very well, that the United States is rudderless, the United States is in horrible shape, people hate each other, giving the impression that the American government is, doesn't know what it's doing, which Trump is very good at doing, puts World War III closer. Everything that Trump is doing makes World War III more likely, not less likely. Hector, do you think free market ideas, deregulation, less taxes are being discussed more, at least in Trump's second term? No. I don't know by whom. No, there was a lot of talk about deregulation first term. There was a lot more action in the first term. And I don't know. I mean, we're only 40 days in, so it's hard to judge. But no, I don't think so. Less taxes, there's very little value to less taxes if you continue borrowing, if you continue spending. The only thing that matters right now is spending, not taxes. So the fact that he's cutting taxes on tips and cutting taxes on Social Security benefits, it's just insignificant. It's stupid and insignificant, It doesn't address any real issues. And it doesn't matter if you continue spending like there's no tomorrow, which, based on the budget that is going to pass the House and the Senate, we continue spending like there's no tomorrow, putting aside Doge because what they do is meaningless if it doesn't translate into a budget. Andrew, I'm seeing Vance as more conniving, ambitious, and similar than I once did. Yeah, I think he is more conniving and ambitious than I even thought. I thought he was smart and intellectually committed to a particular path, but now I have to think he's really after power, and he's really conniving, and he's really manipulative. Yeah, and that combination is very, very, very dangerous. I told you a long time ago when he first ran for the Senate, that this guy was the most dangerous politician in America, him and the guy from Missouri, Josh Hawley. Ryan, did you cover U.S. cutting off intel to Ukraine? Yes, I did. Earlier in the show. You'll find it. Hector, I think we should have more like UK House of Commons heckling debate, cheerleading in U.S. government. Cheers, Yaron. Yeah, I mean, it's such a completely different style. And of course, remember that you're heckling and cheering and everything to the prime minister, but the executive doesn't come other than once a year to talk to Congress. All right, you reminded me, Hector, somebody reminded me because of the UK. Yes, you mentioned the UK. On the 29th of March, so basically in 4 weeks, I will be doing a seminar in the UK on how to be a rational egoist, basically. How to implement rational egoism in your life, how to implement it in your career, in your relationships, love, sex, dynamics with family, the whole shebang. We'll be talking about a lot of things you want to talk about. It'll be a small group, I think. It'll be on the 29th. It's a Saturday. It'll be in center of London. And I'm going to charge £250 for it. It's £250 per person for it. So if you're interested, keep an eye out. We'll have it up on my website soon. There'll also be an email announcing this, and I'll tweet about it. And hopefully we can get, 10 people, maybe 20 people to come. That would be great. But I'll probably need at least 5 people to make it viable. So if you're interested, those of you who are in the UK, anywhere in the UK, center of London on a Saturday, probably in the afternoon, so probably after lunch. For 4 hours. So you get personal time with me. It'll be fun. And so please consider doing it. I think you'll get a lot out of it. It's not going to be made available public. I'm not going to put it up online. So this will be unique content. We're not going to videotape it. You can ask personal questions. It'll really be customized to what you guys want. So please let me know if you're interested. So I make sure that find out about the announcement. You can let me know here. You can let me know on email, yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. You can let me know by sending me a message on Twitter. I hope to see a bunch of you. In London at the seminar on March 29th. I will be spending the week in London giving talks. Oh, you'll be pleased about this. I'm actually going to Parliament. I'm going to be meeting a bunch of MPs, members of Parliament, and Lords from the House of Lords in Parliament on the 24th of March. And that'll be interesting. So supposedly we've got a room for like 30, 40 people, and it's full. It's packed. So there's a lot of MPs that would like to meet. I'm looking forward to that. The topic, you know what the topic is? The topic is trade. The topic is free trade. Where we talk about free trade, what the UK can do, what are the prospects for a trade deal between the UK and the Trump administration, but more importantly, what the UK can do to position itself from a trade perspective. So it'll be a lot of fun. I will not be wearing a wig. But and I'm not going to call them load this and load that. I'm just going to call them by their first names. I'm not even going to wear a tie. I'm not even going to wear a tie. I'm going to be in the British Parliament without a tie. And yeah, I know. But they better get used to it. This is Yaron Brook. This is who I am. Ryan says, if you're looking for anyone to chat about Ukraine, I recommend Professor Darren Gred's, one of the few sane Americans left. Yeah, I looked him up. He seems quite Christian, though. But you're saying he's good in spite of that. So I'll look for that. I am not Orthodox, Chandler. If you haven't noticed, I'm not an Orthodox guy. There's nothing about me that's Orthodox. All right. I will see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow will be in our more regular time. So I look forward to that. And we'll have a show on Friday, and we'll also have a show on Saturday. We've got a sponsored show on Saturday. So I'll let you know the topic tomorrow. I will see you all Orthodox Objectivists. No, there's not me. There are some people who I would consider Orthodox Objectivists, not me. I will see you all. When will I see you? I will see you tomorrow. Have a great evening. It's late here. Bye, everybody.